So IoT, Internet of Things in the enterprise, I think is one of the most interesting areas right now. A lot of companies are doing work in this, and it's mostly around things like sensors and being able to determine, for example, what is room occupancy? Is somebody in a room? Taking this kind of information, whether it's from temperature sensors or room sensors or even electrical sensors, and how much power is being used or whether power is being used at all. Imagine the correlation between something like, is there someone in the room and is there power being used? You'd be able to tell whether you've got, as they call it, vampire sources draining your power. All of this real-time data being streamed somewhere, probably outside the enterprise, and being analyzed to provide information back to the company about things like power usage, heating, cooling, literally anything within in the firm, and giving you the opportunity to do real-time adjustments and understand the real-time costing of things within the company. A lot of CFOs are looking at this. A lot of the infrastructure people are looking at these types of things. It's one of the biggest areas right now, I think, for building management and the industry in general around IoT. So moving forward with an IoT deployment, and what steps should you consider? Well, there's a lot of things to think about. My example that I give everybody, and I think this applies equally in the enterprise or in the home, is when I did a traffic analysis of the IoT devices in my home, 8% of my traffic was going to China. Now, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't know, but it's a great indication of some of the things you have to think about when you start deploying IoT devices in your enterprise. Who made those devices? Who makes the software on the devices? How do you know where they're communicating to, who they're communicating to? What is the security of the devices? How secure are they? Has anybody done penetration testing of the devices? What is the security profile of the devices? There's a lot to consider. Another one is, do you have those IoT devices on your corporate LAN? Just imagine the worst case situation where one of those IoT devices is a bad device and it's been hacked. And if that's on your corporate LAN, someone is getting access to your information. So you need to think a lot about how you virtually separate these IoT devices in your firewall and your security infrastructure. And you need to spend a lot of time looking at the devices and understanding how they've been built from a security posture perspective, and build your risk profile and your response profiles if there is a security breach around those devices. And don't forget about privacy. IoT devices are sending data back and forth. What kind of data? Is it PII data? Is it private data of some nature? Where is it being stored and how is it being stored? You need to think about all those things. IoT and identity, big topic. Absolutely, we believe that identity extends to IoT, or IoT needs to have identity. And the reason for that is, if you think of IoT and you think of devices, you think of somebody's office, or you think of a building that's putting in smart meters, that's putting in thermostats. How many are there? There's going to be way more of these sensors than there are people. Who owns those sensors? Who do you need to contact when there is some kind of an issue with a sensor, or if a sensor needs to be patched or updated in some fashion, or you need to track where those sensors are? So being able to tie a sensor, an IoT device, to an identity or a person is a very important thing. It's going to become increasingly prevalent as more and more IoT devices get deployed in the enterprise. So you want to get a handle on that identity. You want to be able to understand who owns those devices and who to go to if there's a problem, or heaven forbid there's a breach. Is the password dead? Unfortunately not. I wish the password was dead. I suffer a lot from the same things that you probably suffer from, which is logging in multiple times every day. The problem with having so many systems at companies, or even a few systems at a company, is that you need to remember the password for each one of these systems. And most of these systems have a different security policy. In my own company, I'm changing passwords on a 30-day frequency, a 45-day frequency, a 90-day frequency. So you can imagine that you have to constantly change these passwords on different systems, remember them, change them to something different. It's pretty hard. And then the other problem is that sometimes these systems have different security standards around them. You may have to use a smart card to access something, or you may have to use your one-time password. And the problem with that is you have to have those systems with you. You've got to have your smart card with you. You've got to know the password. You've got to have your one-time password, which may be on your mobile phone. All these things reduce productivity. They increase security, but they reduce productivity for you and I, and it's a very unfortunate thing. I'd love to say that the password is dead or dying. I know there's a lot of people working on this kind of a problem, but it's still there, and we all have to suffer through this, unfortunately, for today. So is it possible to have strong security and at the same time have happy employees? Because up until this point, that's been pretty darn hard, because as I've said in the past, having to have all these different passwords and changing them is pretty difficult. Having all these different security mechanisms that are attached to these systems, again, difficult for the end users. There is a way to achieve harmony. We have seen some of this around a new area within, I'll call it computing, called context-aware authentication or risk-based authentication. And what I mean by that is being able to analyze in real time what someone is doing or where they're coming from. And the example I use is a fairly simple example. If somebody's inside the enterprise and they're trying to get to a system, just ask them for their user ID and password. Don't ask for any further security above and beyond that. But if they happen to be outside the enterprise, at home, or in my particular case, traveling to England, that's the time that you do want to ask for some enhanced security. Perhaps they need to use their smart card. Perhaps they need to use their one-time password from their mobile phone. This allows you to sort of graduate the security depending on the particular situation that's going on with that particular person. If they're traveling, if they're in a country that's not a great country that has a lot of hackers, you can increase that security if you're traveling in China, for example, or some other country, or if it's out of hours. Normally I log in from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So if I'm logging in at 3 a.m., that might be a reason for increased security in that particular case. So this risk-based or adaptive authentication, adaptive security is a new area of technology that companies are starting to see and the industry is starting to promote. And I think that's the way that we can kind of bring together security and productivity and the happiness of the end user. So context-aware security hasn't been adopted in a great way or with a lot of pickup, mainly because it's not very well known. It's, as I said earlier, it's a fairly new area of technology. There's not a lot of awareness of it. There are not a lot of people that understand it, and one of the other problems is because it's a fairly new piece of technology, a lot of the companies that are selling it, it's fairly expensive. But once you start seeing and you're introduced to what the capabilities are and how that helps both increase security but also make your end users more happy and more productive, I think we'll see that number going up from where it is today to a higher fashion. And once we see more organizations, like for example even Dell, getting into this, we will be able to help our customers and provide solutions that are more cost effective for them and help to put that pricing pressure to help our customers bring down the cost of these types of systems.